Hello, designers, and welcome back to our four-part series on using Adobe Dimension to create print resolution package design prototypes. In part two, we're going to be looking at the build stage of 3D modeling. So we'll get some 3D models, objects into our scene, and we will look at placing graphics from Illustrator. I would also like to show you how I set up my Illustrator files to aid in my workflow getting into Dimension. So back into Dimension we go. You will remember in part one, we left off with a really simple background. Doesn't look like much right now because it doesn't have any materials on it and we haven't adjusted the lighting yet. Spinning around in space, I just have two slightly angled but perpendicular planes. And the intent here, if I go back to my home camera bookmark, is that when we're way zoomed in on this, we actually have a nice filled canvas with background, and that'll just help sell the illusion that our prototypes are the real deal. Okay, on to build. So we need a model. I think for this one, I'm doing so many of these demos lately. I think for this one, I'm gonna go ahead and use the tube. I like this tube. It comes in stock with kind of a cardboard on it. And the nice thing about it, if you look over here on the right hand side, my scene panel, the package actually is split as two addressable pieces, both the bottom canister portion and also the lid up top. So based on how simple our environment is, I'm just gonna, and if you didn't know, you can just click and drag on models. You are not limited to only addressing objects with the gimbal, with the X, Y, and Z coordinates, and also the rotation here. You can click and drag on objects if that's a little easier for you to place. I probably want to be somewhere back in here. I do want to make sure my model is flat to the ground in here. And then I want to make this, I'm going to make sure I have my proportions constrained here. And then I want to say that my tube is supposed to be uh, not 9 inches wide, 9 inches. I'm looking for 9 inches tall, actually. And that's not big enough. Let's go with 18 inches is a good size. Maybe I had 12 by 18 prints in there. And then if I uncheck my proportions, maybe I want this a little more slender. So I'm going to go by 6. And right now, that's going to make this an oval. But if I adjust the X and Z to the same measurement, now I'm back to a tube. So here's what I'm looking at. Let me orbit around for you. Here's my top, bottom. We're flat to ground. I'm going to immediately go back to my home view and zoom out, dolly out just a little bit here. Okay, we are set. We are ready for graphics. So what I would like to show you is how I set up my Illustrator files. And what you can see, I'm going to go ahead and open up my artboards panel. I do have everything named over here because that is my uh, best practice habit that I am into of naming my artboards and in a meaningful way, just like you would naming layers in Photoshop. Everything that you can see is on its own separate artboard. And the reason that I do that is because once you place a single, number one, everything's in one place. Number two, once you place into Dimension to get graphics on your model, you can easily swap from artboard to artboard to artboard to change things up. And that makes it really easy. If you're placing panels in there, you can copy and paste and just swap graphics. It's think of it the same way you would dealing with links in InDesign, swapping out graphics. Also, if you have to come back into this file to make revisions, which you can easily do out of Dimension just by double clicking on the icon of the graphic that you have placed, uh, it makes things really easy to navigate around in here. So what I have a full-on graphic, just a plain background in case I would need it. I have a repeating pattern of some bacon and eggs because we're in kind of a breakfast thing. Over here, I have some possible typesets for the brand name, and then I went ahead and isolated Senior Yoke here just because I thought I might need him. So that's how I have my file set up. I have everything visible that I need visible and everything hidden that I don't want to show in the final graphics on my package. Okay, so that is my Illustrator setup. Now that I'm in here, and I'm going to hold off on changing color or putting materials on this until we get to the next stage. What I want to concentrate on here is doing graphics. And what I want to put graphics on is actually the canister, the bottom portion itself. Now, I just double clicked on the bottom of this, and if we check the scene panel to see where I'm inside the canister and I'm looking at to material. The other thing I could have done, because I was out here where I had the entire tube package selected, is click on the canister here, and now I know I'm addressing just the bottom portion of this canister. I'm going to go down to the actions panel. I'm going to hit place graphic on model. That's going to allow me to navigate to my Illustrator file that I just showed you where I have multiple artboards set up with all the graphics I could need. I'm going to go ahead and hit open. You'll notice right now for placement, I'm set to decal, and actually what I want to do is go ahead and change that to fill, so I'm getting a repeating pattern. Then I'm going to click on the graphic thumbnail to open that up. This is where I can change the artboards, and what I want to put on the bottom of the canister is actually that repeating bacon and eggs pattern. I believe, nope, that's artboard. Wow, 7 all the way at the end. That was a last minute addition. Okay. Now I want to adjust the scale of this, right? So just like Illustrator, I'm going to click and drag holding shift. I want to get this down to a reasonable size. I want to take a quick orbit around this and make sure I got the whole thing filled, and I do. That looks pretty good. I like that. Okay. So that's one. I could copy and paste that and switch out the artboard for the move that I'm going to do next. But instead of doing that, I'm going to go back to the canister. Notice you don't necessarily have to be all the way inside the canister as far as showing those properties to be able to place a graphic on there. I'm going to go back to that same Illustrator file. This time I want decal. I want just a single placement. What I'm going to put in here now by switching my artboards is a name for my product. I like that one. That looks pretty good. Um, and I think I'm just going to scale this ever so slightly. And let's put it down here by the bottom. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. Now, what I would like to do, I want to place Mr. Yoke right here on the top of the lid. And then the rest of the moves I'm going to do on the canister, I'm going to hit at the material stage. So I want to click on just the lid, and then back to my place graphic on model, my same file, and I want to be on decal for placement. I'm going to click on thumbnail, switch out my artboard. I think Mr. Isolated Yoke is, sorry, he's in here somewhere. 7, 6, really? 1, 2, 2. There we go. All right. Look at that right off the bat. Uh, let's get his reach just kind of almost the whole thing. All right, now I need to orbit this so I'm looking dead on straight down. I'm not worried about the rotation at this point. What I'm trying to make sure is that I'm visually centered on the top of this can, not mechanically centered. And I do want his head a little higher, so he's going to look like he's up ever so slightly. Now, what I'm going to have to take into consideration, and I'm just going to click back out on the environment so that I don't have anything selected, and then I'm going to hit my home bookmark, and then I'm going to tilt back to this. I'm going to have to be careful when I light this so I don't get the same shine that I was seeing when I was looking at this top down. All right, back to home, zoom out. Here's a little view of what I have going on. This name placement, actually, when it comes to, and I can double click on that, when it comes to getting a nice view in the render might be a little difficult. So maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to go a third of the way down. And then what I want to do is copy and go back out into my scene, go into the lid, make sure I'm fully all the way in there. And now I'm going to paste. And what that did was instead of copy and pasting out at the outside or having to place again and try to match the scale, it allowed me to paste directly into the lid. So let's say that this one goes here, and then I'm going to mirror that with the one on the bottom right here so that when you have the lid off the tube, you can still see the brand name in both places. All right, now back to not render preview, sorry, back to home. This is where we are for now. Up next, materials. I'm going to save and I will see you shortly.